It's March 13th, 2024. So I'm in this flag system. I use this to represent the whatever and the whatever, 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 which I know what I mean by it. This is the current edition of the Queen's property with the iconic symbol here. Um, this is something I did with one of the children, just for people that I've met, in whatever of life experiences. Um, well, inside the United States of America, the Federal Reserve note. This happens to be the Washington. They say George Washington. On the back, it's the ONE with the "In God We Trust." On the front is Jackson, and then on the back we have the White House. So I met with the local Zion Episcopalian church from Douglaston this morning on Zoom. As I sat there, I was sitting by the window, and the backdrop was the sphere, the Earth is what they call it, but out in space with just a little light over the horizon. And as I'm sitting there, the sunlight coming in whitewashes my entire face with sunlight, like a photon level that does not look natural. So that goes to some of the irrationality and rational mathematics that's going on in the environment at the moment. Then it was an Apple iPad. Then the color contrast, almost like the camera tried to adjust itself and then could see my full face. But you can see that the photon spectrum had been tampered with, whether it be self-adjusting, automatic, I do not know. I don't have that level of autocratic information. So, but I just noticed it. I made sure to mention it to the other people on the call about the sunlight, please, that they notice it, and could they see it, which they could. Then we did a passage about Mark. It mentions something, I'm only saying my part, my contribution. It says something about the trees and walking trees, and I mentioned a personal story. I said, what's really interesting with that, what that brings up for me is, I've been in the forest hundreds of times with my father, and I love nature. I love being with the trees in the forest, but I really I know nothing about arbory, or the arboretum, level of things. And then I took my son one trip, with a scout master from Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts or whatever they call it. And we go into the forest, and now going in with not only a scout master, but then his crew of trainees, and from the New York City Parks and Recreation Department, and going in with them. Like, my son didn't quite get it because he has eyes, he can see, he has ears, he can hear, but was he really connected, invested inside of this moment from his life experience thus far? No. What I've been exposed to and what I'm at intellectually, going into that moment and being able to speak about it, was transformative. Because I go out with my father in the forest, and we just have a great time. Nicole, look, the colors on the trees. It's a different conversation. The colors on the trees, they're like a picture or a painting, and it's an artismal viewpoint and vantage point of it, and it's heartfelt, and it's me and my father, and it's nature. We look for deers. I mean, it was the same when they took me to go look for moose in the van up in New Hampshire. It was that level of spiritual experience. And then, but in the physical realm. And then to go with my son with a real scoutmaster, like real professionals from New York City Parks Department, like studied trees, knows foliage, knows how to speak arboretum, uses big fancy words, and then all of a sudden I look at my son and I'm like, listen, I know how to walk in the forest, kind of, sort of, but like compared to them, I know very little. You should know my level of knowledge on whatever's going on. Like, they're the ones that you listen to because they're the ones that know way more. They have their program is built all around that level of knowledge. Mine, not so much. I can enjoy it. I walk through it. It's a beautiful thing, but like, I wasn't given the opportunity to learn at that level. So that was important this morning, speaking to whatever level of church I have, in case it ever comes up in the big wide world of surveillance things, knowing like what's going on in the media and how many cameras there are out, and I'm doing this to protect this and my son, from whatever's going on in the big wide world of this North American theater, and then whatever happens in water theater, and then whatever might happen in like the exoplanets outside of my like what conversation, and however interplanetary works. So there's that. So then so there's that conversation, and I grounded the conversation in confirmation that where we live and when we go outside, it is that 26 letter alphabet. Those are our signs and symbols. And reading a passage from Mark, listening to the mother, and just how much, like, she's like, I wanted to like demand answers and all this stuff. And I'm like, I hear you, but here we are in the Gospel of Mark. And in the Gospel of Mark, in our 26 letter alphabet, we have a symbol when we don't know something. And it's called question what? It's question mark. And she's like, oh, she's like, that's, and I don't know, again, like if it was helpful in the moment, maybe going forward, elevated, whatever. But it seems significant. So that was that. I did not know, and I don't have access to Mark himself, in like a two-way conversation or looking someone in the eyes, about like this don't go in the village. It's like, how do I not go in the village? I live in a village, and currently the village is whatever it is in the whatever, the surveillance cameras everywhere. But within the NYPD like subscript or conscript of whatever they are. And so there's that level of knowledge. And then I'm going to pause this and go to the television. Now, I also mentioned to the people at the level of church that I have access to, that in 1990, that I saw this morning, which I'm going to make mention of, on the CBS, they have this, what I would refer to as a campaign. It's a Black women's campaign. They look like outside of the 48 states for this conversation, just to ground myself correctly. And that apparatus or operandi, whatever it was inside New York City, Queens, when I went to St. John's Prep. Now they come out this morning, FDA approved, with drug therapy of Descovy and Truvada, which is an HIV preparedness. And I'm just like, oh, good Lord. So I'm going to make mention of that because right now there's something going on in Haiti where, and I even said to the church, I was like, listen, I grew up in Long Island on a hill very secluded, very Peace Corps, very diplomatic, like aristocratic kind for my level of humanity on Long Island. But it was peaceful things. It was not provocative. It was not like war theater. Like, it was not none of that. I was to be married to somebody of importance, and he was to find me during the time of marriage. That was it. And then I got cut off from my own kind. Then they put me into Queens in my senior year, 95, 96. And now all of a sudden I'm submerged in diversity. And it's no longer like Long Island cheerleading, which was sweet and innocent. It is now stepping, and they have all these cultural clubs, Asia, Africa, Latin, but there's nothing European. There was nothing for my ethnic or my cultural being in that Queens high school in 95, 96. Not one. There was nothing. I asked the person who gave me a tour of the school, and she said there was nothing that was directed for my person in that high school. So whatever that was, and then so that happened, and then this morning this thing comes out, and now I'm looking, and the Caribbean community is having a problem. Haiti, something happened with them, and I realize as I'm watching this Caribbean community, like, they speak of rebels and dogs and revolutions and like all of this like really aggressive language and war theater, for which I was not prepared for this at all. I was to be married to somebody of significance, and instead some kind of astrologic Taurus happened, and there's a real problem in like reality and physical realm. And I don't know how to speak of it respectfully. I'm trying my hardest. Um, so there's that. And then there's also a conversation between something on what they refer to as GMA, with their reporter, who also looks like she's from outside the 48 states, but now inside of the New York City airspace as an anchor and reporter, which I think the microphones and are making more of a complex issue, which perplexes if you don't have the correct mathematical formula and you're headed in the correct government, like within the US and the dollhouse and the standard of the founders and forefathers, for which that would be law abiding and not on the fence of taking actions that might be considered meddling with the United States of America government, being the 48 states, because I don't know how the Department of State handles the outside children. I mean, they are, I guess, technically the nursery for the world stage, I suppose. So I'm going to pause this for a second, and I'm going to pull up the television from what I saw this morning. So interestingly, because normally I wouldn't put this progressive up, but my mother, in almost like an ID to EGO to SUPEREGO, my mother, just in her normal subliminal routine of the morning, we always, and my mother is regimen, we always watch CBS in the morning. Always. She sits in her chair. She watches it from beginning to end. Like, that's her thing. For some reason this morning, she wanted to break rank or break routine. And I'm like, no, this is weird. And but of course I'm just observatory and witness. And she puts on GMA. And I'm like, what's going on, Lynn? I was like, why don't you just tape it? We'll watch CBS and we'll go back to it. She's like, no, it starts at 7:30. I want to sit here and I want to watch it. I don't want you touching the remote. All right. And this is a recap of what it was about, which I thought was very interesting.
Making it easy to bundle insurance.
Well, they were actually trying to put it to rest. Instead, they've made it much worse.
Yeah.
Now, Tina Brown's coming up and talk about it.
Lots to talk about.
Because the rumors are out of control. Out of control. We're going to begin with this, also out of control. Breaking news on the growing crisis in Haiti, which is on the brink of collapse due to criminal gangs in that country who now want political power. So overnight, the prime minister, his name is Ariel Henry, said that he will resign. He said that in a video statement. Christiane Benavides is in Haiti's neighboring country, the Dominican Republic, and is covering this story for us.
Oh, wait, I thought I was on GMA. Hold on a second. So GMA was episode 83. Just numerology seems to work.
Cuts. I'm not talking about just like 10 or 20% off.
And they're not done? Now, could other major retailers follow suit?
An ABC News exclusive, Christina Applegate, in her first sit-down interview since being diagnosed with MS. You've given her permission to go, this sucks! With good friend, soprano star Jamie Lynn Sigler by her side through their shared disease.
It sucks. Yeah. It sucks. It's not my favorite disease. I've had a couple. It's not my favorite one.
How long has she really been facing this?
I was kind of putting on a little act for everybody for so long.
Now her emotional, angry, funny takes.
And I don't care anymore.
And meet the real Christina this morning.
Live in Times Square.
This is the piece on the drug therapies and the campaign that the persons in 1995 and 96, that when I went to high school in Queens, because I was forced, I did not want to go to Queens High School at all, but I had to go into the public for high school because they attacked my father from financial whatever and threw him into ruins, which then meant we had to move back in with my grandfather, and my life changed drastically.
Mornings at 7:30. 5 years ago, the U.S. government unveiled a plan to end the HIV epidemic by 2030. More than 30,000 people are diagnosed with HIV every year in this country. This is not a problem for any single community, gay or straight. That's important to note. Almost a quarter of Americans infected are heterosexual. Medication to prevent HIV infection through sexual contact, known as PrEP, is 99% effective when taken as prescribed. But as CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder reports, not everyone at risk for HIV is getting that message.
Step up.
You may have seen the commercials.
So they use the word step up, they use the word PrEP, and then they use the word Discovy. And that's a drug therapy through the FDA.
Descovy for PrEP is a once-daily prescription medicine that helps protect against HIV.
But weren't sure what PrEP was all about.
Would PrEP be a good option for me?
LaTanya Wilkins said she never knew PrEP was for people like her, even after she'd had an HIV scare.
I was dating a guy, and while we were dating, he found out that he was living with HIV.
And when you went to get tested, no one talked to you at the time about PrEP?
Nope.
And I'm watching from mathematics, the microphones and the actors in the act, who they are, how they're campaigning, because at HCGH, does HIV, is that a parallel, like, dimensional conversation for a different set of complex and perplex between prescriptions, transcriptions, and conscriptions? Just curious.
At the time, I hadn't even heard of PrEP, period.
Wilkins didn't start taking PrEP until years later.
I thought PrEP was for gay men or trans women. I didn't know that I could take PrEP.
Now she tries to educate others.
This looks to me like some form of nursery conversation with outside of the 48 trying to figure out some kind of money-making schematic. But then right now, who are the law-abiding ones? And then who are the ones who are completely bastardizing and misusing this? Because I've been hurt in the process and I didn't agree to any of this. I don't know whose formula this is. Whose model is this?
Make sure they have the resources to take with them. My conversation would be, girl, you heard about PrEP. And girl, you take some PrEP, that's the added peace of mind.
It's Truvada for PrEP.
The FDA approved
And now this one
PrEP medications in 2012.
This one's called Truvada. So you've got Discovery, which sounds like discovery, and Truvada, which sounds like truth. And it's PrEP for pre-exposure.
But more than a decade later.
And again, I was born into a dystopian society here. They moved me to utopia, and then something happened, and they threw me back into dystopia. And here we are.
He estimates only about a third of the 1.2 million Americans who could benefit from PrEP medications have been prescribed them. And a closer look reveals a stunning disparity. Among people considered at risk for HIV, 94% of white people are now on PrEP, but less than 13% of Black people, and less than 15% of women are getting PrEP.
I started Sister Love out of anger and frustration that nothing was happening.
Dazon Dixon Diallo founded a women's health advocacy group in Atlanta some 40 years ago because she...
Now, this is inside of the 48 states where we have a Federal Note Reserve. We have a Federal Reserve note. We have a United States of America. We have a 26-letter alphabet. We have a sign or symbol that's question mark, which is outside of the 26. And then there's this other story from the Caribbean going on at the moment where they're speaking of rebels and revolution and really angry stuff about how their treatment is in that level of non-government. And they're asking America for help, so the story says. But yet inside of America, I don't understand why those persons, if they like this bridge of some form of whatever, why would they actively hurt the persons inside the United States and inside of North America? I don't understand how this relationship is working functionally anyhow, because it has not functioned in a utopia for me personally throughout my life. I just wanted to get to the person of significance that I was supposed to be married to and within and kept within that loop. And that didn't happen. Instead, it feels like being railroaded or swiped spiritually and physically by a Taurus. And again, and that gets confusing because my mother's a Taurus. So I don't know why two men, Taurus, got involved, and why wherever astrologic Leo wanted me to go, I do not know why that deteriorated. I have no idea. I'm not looking for that. That's more of a rhetorical answer. What I do want is I want it fixed.
She saw that Black women like Wilkins were being left behind in the fight against HIV.
I know I am HIV possible.
Messaging and advertising about PrEP has only recently been tailored and targeted to Black women.
I'm a wife, a mom, I'm polyamorous, and I PrEP.
How many people we get tested for HIV?
Dixon Diallo and her team also stress the need to normalize conversations about sex and HIV and to be what she calls sex positive.
We want to acknowledge that people have sex And that just like anything else that we engage in, there are risks.
Science and education brought about a dramatic decline in the number of new HIV cases in the United States. But a case now before a federal appeals court could limit insurance coverage for PrEP. Some employers argue that they shouldn't have to pay for drugs that, quote, facilitate behaviors contrary to the employer's sincere religious beliefs.
I know it works because I was in a relationship with someone living with HIV and never contracted the virus.
For LaTanya Wilkins, tough choices may lie ahead. The cost of the PrEP medication, clinic visits, and lab tests averages more than $5,000 a year.
If my insurance provider decides, I don't want to cover this anymore, I really don't know what I would do because PrEP costs more than my rent right now. I have a lot of anxiety about that.
Wow. Dr. Gounder is also editor-at-large for public health at KFF and joins us at the table. Really good to have you here. I think the story is really interesting because I think most people aren't even aware that HIV is still an issue. Mm-hmm. They certainly haven't heard of the drug PrEP. So what should people do if they're at risk? What kind of factors should they take into consideration?
Well, people who are having unprotected sex, so not using condoms every single time they have sex.
They're at risk.
And if they have a partner who has HIV, or they have multiple sexual partners who have not been tested for HIV, or if they've had an STD in the last 6 months, those are the folks we consider to be at risk for HIV and who may want to get on PrEP.
And why are they worried about paying for PrEP?
Well, so there's this federal court case, first of all, that could end insurance coverage or not require employers to provide insurance coverage for this. You also have Gilead, that's the company that makes these combination pills for PrEP. They're looking to narrow their patient assistance program by the end of 2024. And then on top of that, you have congressional Republicans who propose really deep cuts to funding for the CDC's HIV prevention program.
But she said the cost of PrEP is higher than her rent.
Yeah, it is quite high because it's not just the pills. You also have to have these clinic visits and lab tests. And so all of that combined is really quite expensive.
Such a fascinating story, Dr. Gounder. Thanks for your reporting. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, Scott Peterson, the man convicted of killing his pregnant wife, Lacey.
Good morning to you.
Now, this is the Haitian and Caribbean conversation.
Has been unable to enter Haiti since trying to return from a diplomatic trip. In fact, he tried to return through right here, the Dominican Republic, but he was turned around, ended up in Puerto Rico, and now he's going to be out of office.
After weeks of pressure, Haiti Prime Minister Ariel Henry delivered the news he is stepping down.
We are pleased to announce the commitment to a transitional governance arrangement.
Henry's announcement followed an agreement struck at an emergency meeting in Jamaica between leaders of Caribbean nations and Secretary of State Antony Blinken to form a council to eventually find a new leader in Haiti.
A political crisis, escalating violence, unrest. This has created an untenable situation for the Haitian people.
Henry was sworn in 2 weeks after the assassination of Jovenel Moïse in 2021 and has repeatedly delayed new elections in Haiti, citing security concerns. Jacqueline Charles covers the Caribbean for the Miami Herald.
Trying to get some kind of a political deal among Haitians has been something that Henry has not been able to accomplish. And at the same time, gangs stepped into this power vacuum.
Over the last 2 weeks, attacks on prisons, police stations, and the airport have led the U.S. to evacuate non-essential personnel. As Haiti's most notorious gang leader, Jimmy Jarazir, who goes by Barbecue, has demanded Henry step down, or the country would face a, quote, genocide.
The urgent action is needed on both the political and security tracks to help move things in a better direction, to help do right by the people of Haiti.
In Jamaica, Blinken promised $100 million in security aid, along with $33 million in humanitarian aid.
Now, I don't know, because I've never been to the Dominican Republic. Is he the correct looking complexion for Dominican Republic? I don't know. I don't work in the nursery, and I don't know the outside 48. I know the inside 48 with the sometimes 50, depending on if there's water involved. But I do not know anything outside. I don't know whose children they are. I don't know how the Department of State handles them. But when they affect me on the interior, I'm having issues with, and I just had this conversation with the church. I'm like, and she brought up to my attention, she's like, no, Jesus was 30 years. They did not know what Jesus was doing. He did not get disciples till he was like 30. And I'm like, oh, well, that's good to know. Because again, at the whatever, in questions that no one's asking at this point for me, I don't even have this. There's things that happened early on, and I'm trying to solve that mystery while I'm trying to also fix my life and make sure that my son has a place in the future and something to live into.
Conflict has left so many people in Haiti with dwindling supplies, with food and fuel running low. Gail?
Very, very tough situation there. Thank you.
And when I see someone like this person barbecue, and then I see her in New York City in the New York City airspace on special contract, no less, who I don't have any way of chasing that detail. But somebody does. So is this provocation? Because it seems very provocative, especially with drug therapies like Descovy and something or other. And with the time dilation the way that it has been. But then again, I also have son to worry about at other levels of corporate and scientific discovery and implementation and all of this other stuff that's going on. Like there's a lot of levels of involvement, and I'm trying to really cautiously stay very in this point of view from this point. This is what's going on, and this is what's taken place, because it was not always this way. But I'm looking at how out in the Caribbean, in the outside the 48 states, how their persons, like they're involved in a lot of very aggressive, militarized behavior. And they have military vocabulary, and they have a military thought process. I don't have that on the interior at the moment. I have a complete North American security apparatus that takes care of that. I have other focus things that I need to do. So that's where I don't know how to stay in good contact with them and who my approved family line representatives are. Within the security industry. I don't have names and phone numbers. I don't know who they are, that if I see something, who should I be contacting? So it's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxies, Broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.